Hi there, Colin Davis, ShadowTechAlchemy.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about shadow work from my perspective and from the perspective of the work that Melissa Mari and I developed. Of course, we start with Carl Jung's understanding because shadow work comes from Carl Jung. The whole idea of the shadow comes from Jung. And I'll give you a basic background on the shadow and just I'll kind of take you through it, and then I'll give you some shadow work practices. And everything that I'm going to talk about today is also in my 2024 book, which I give out for free actually, which is called Transforming Darkness, and it's at ShadowTechAlchemy.com. So you can go into that, and that book is, I tried to make everything as clear and concise as I could, but it still might be kind of advanced. You could just skip to the shadow work practices chapter if you want to. But today I'm going to try to just talk in a way that's just kind of relaxed and normal, and just kind of take you through this. So let's start with what the shadow is. So the shadow it's our dark side. It's the part of our consciousness. It's everything in our consciousness, in our mind or our psyche, you could say. Psyche and mind, these are the same things. It's the aspects of our psyche that are disruptive to our consciousness and disruptive to society. So we inherit from our ancestry and from our animal heritage all kinds of drives, of behavior, of energies that are antisocial and destructive. Whether it's aggression or whether it's drives for power and dominance, or whether it's sexuality. We inherit this material, it's in us, but it's not appropriate to just, let it out at any time, and so we repress it. The conscious mind represses this darker material, this antisocial material, down into the unconscious. And the shadow is, in the Jungian sense, there is a personal shadow and there's a collective shadow. The collective shadow is kinds of material like I just mentioned that all human beings have. And then there's the personal shadow. That's the darker elements that come from your particular situation, from your family upbringing, from your ancestry, from your particular early life, let's say. And so there's going to be, leftovers of trauma and wounding, and there's going to be, rage is going to be in there, and fear is going to be in there, and grief and guilt and shame. And, these are all also collective shadow components, but that the amount of them and the way that they actually manifest are going to be particular to you. They're going to be particular to each individual person. And so, that's the shadow. The shadow is also the personal side of what we call evil in the world, because when we behave in ways that we've deemed to be evil, which are basically ways of behaving which are completely destructive to society, when we behave in those ways, we're basically displacing or moving out our own shadow energy that we don't know what to do with. And the way we do that, the way we move our shadow energy, is through projection and, like I said, displacement. So projection is the act of seeing in others those things that we carry in our shadows. In other words, if I can't tolerate the thought that I might be aggressive or passive aggressive or striving for power or narcissistic or whatever the tendency is, I haven't been able to face that about myself. So when I see that in another person, they trigger me, and I pick that up and I throw it on them. Jung used to say, other people serve as a hook to hold our own shadows. And so, so we do this constantly. It's other people who are the bad ones. It's other people who are the aggressive ones, other people who are the lustful ones or greedy ones or whatever it is. And they might be to some degree, because we all are these things to some degree. But we let them carry our shadows for us. And then we take action to do something about it. Then we type furiously on the keyboard, or we go to a protest, or we join the army, or whatever it is, and we then take physical action to move that shadow energy out of our psyches. And so really the world goes around in this way to a great degree. A great degree of all of social activity and conflict is the act of projecting and displacing our own shadows onto other people, onto other nations, etc. And so really this is the source of I mean, the shadow is the source of evil, and then us projecting and displacing the shadow is how we proliferate it and keep it going. And because we don't generally see this, very few people see this and take an accounting of it, then we're just unconsciously just pushing all this psychic pollution around. And so now, not only are we hurting other people this way, going to war with other people this way, but it's also this shadow energy, to the degree it stays inside of us and isn't projected or displaced out, it eats us up from the inside. So it leads to all kinds of neurotic behavior and disease of all kinds, and psychosomatic symptoms and syndromes, and depression and anxiety, and it slowly eats us up. And so you could say that actually a great deal of the pathologies of our society in general, across the board, whether they're mental or whether they're cultural or whether they're bodily in the body, whatever they are, a great deal of these pathologies are rooted in our unassimilated shadows. And you know, it's excusable in a way, because we didn't really have a good understanding of this until maybe 100 years ago, when Jung pretty much figured it out. But now we have 100 years of knowledge of this, and there's a lot of great Jungians who have developed this understanding even more. And so really now there's no excuse, except for the fact that it's hard. You know, doing shadow work is tough. And it's a lifestyle it's a very self-responsible and ethical lifestyle, is what it is. And it's a path of healing. It's a path of enlightenment. It is a path of healing and enlightenment. And like you know, it's no matter what path you take of self-development, of maturing yourself, of growing up, it's going to take effort, and it's going to take willpower, and it's going to take time, and it's going to be your lifestyle, basically. And so that's what this has to become. It has to become part of your lifestyle, part of your ethical system for living. And now, well, I've got some notes right here, so I just want to make sure that I could actually read you a couple quotes here that I have from Jung and Edinger that are going to be helpful. Or here's Eric Neumann, actually. Depth Psychology and the New Ethic. This is a book of his. To the extent that he does live in reality, the individual is an alchemical retort in which the elements present, or excuse me, start over there. To the extent that he does live in reality, the individual is an alchemical retort in which the elements present in the collective are melted down and refashioned to form a new synthesis, which is then offered to the collective. But the predigestion of evil, which he carries out as a part of the process of assimilating his shadow, makes him at the same time an agent for the immunization of the collective. An individual's shadow is invariably bound up with the collective of his group, and as he digests his own evil, a fragment of the collective evil is invariably co-digested at the same time. And Edinger clarifies that by saying, to the extent that one assimilates his own shadow and doesn't contribute to the psychic pollution by projecting it, he is contributing to the process of digestion of collective evil. So that's it. And so this is like you said there, the new ethic. This is an ethical way of living. It's saying, I'm going to become conscious of my shadow material, my aggression, my all my control freaking and all my shadow stuff. I'm going to become conscious of it to the extent that I can, and then I'm going to process that shadow material. I'm going to integrate it, as the Jungians say. I'm going to integrate that shadow material. I'm going to bring it into consciousness. I'm going to pull it out of the unconscious, out of the depths, and I'm going to get it into my conscious mind, and I'm going to get my mind around it, and I'm going to forgive myself for it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to cry through it. I'm going to let it out. I'm going to journal it out. I'm going to talk it out. I'm going to get it into consciousness and take responsibility for it and say, yes, this is a part of me. I'm going to trace it back to my family line. I'm going to say, this was in my mother. This was in my father. This was in my grandparents. This is in my family line, and now this is a part of me. And I take responsibility for it. And this is fueling some of my neurotic behavior. And this is contributing to my relationship conflicts. This is contributing to my addictions. This is contributing to my inability to keep a job and always arguing with my boss, or whatever it is that's going on, your pathology in life. I'm going to take responsibility for this, and I'm going to work with this material until I start to clean out. Because this is maintenance work. This is psychic maintenance work. This is taking out the garbage. It's cleaning your pipes. It's sewer work. It's plumbing work. And it's like, can you imagine if you don't take your garbage out, if you don't clean the pipes, if you don't dump the septic tank, if you don't clean up your footprint in your personal physical life, you're going to be wallowing in trash and garbage and disease, and everyone knows that. But at the psychological level, we don't know that. Well, we intuitively recognize that that's true, but we don't really have, as a culture, tools for dealing with it. They're not really built into our religious system so well. There are some tools built into into Christianity, for example, like confession, for example, in the Catholic Church. That is basically, it's a shadow work process, and so you could probably do a study on that and find all the places in our Christian religious system where there is shadow work in there, but a lot of it is projection and displacement, especially in the Old Testament. So this is kind of something that is relatively new, and it comes at a time when we need it more than ever, when the world is totally interconnected, and when the population is so great and everything is moving so fast. This is the kind of, we need this now. We need to update our mind-body operating systems and bring in this plug-in, so to speak, this shadow work plug-in. We need to understand what the shadow is and start doing shadow work in our own lives, teaching it to other people, and start taking responsibility for our junk, because we're all creating evil, we're all creating disease, and we're doing it together by not taking out our own psychic garbage. So let's talk about how we actually do shadow work and what that involves. So the first thing is basically it's kind of just the first. I mean, I kind of went over this kind of, but the first thing is basically the decision to take responsibility for your own psychic garbage, and to recognize that conflicts that come into your life are not really. Conflicts that come into your life are not because other people who have psychic garbage just found their way into your life and are torturing you, and it's just a coincidence, or it's just an anomaly. No, you've attracted those people into your life, and because you have a resonance with them. You know, you have shadow material that resonates with their shadow material, and you're attracting each other so that you can do what Melissa and I called the victim-victor cycle, so that you can do a pain body cycle, using Eckhart Tolle's term. And so conflict that comes into your life is part of you, and disease that comes into your life is part of you. It's rooted in you. And there is a collective component, there is a familial component, there's a genetic component, and some of this is beyond your ability to control. But to the degree that you can take responsibility, you must take responsibility. So Melissa and I said, you take 100% responsibility for everything that happens to you and that happens through you. And so you're not just taking responsibility for yourself and your own behavior, but you're taking responsibility for your whole movie of life, we would say. Your whole movie of life. This is your movie. These are things that are happening in your movie, and they are linked to psychological processes in your own unconscious. You may not know about them yet, but that's your responsibility to get to know those things and to work with them and integrate them. So the first thing is just an acceptance of your responsibility to do the work, to carry on and to take it seriously. The next thing is to become conscious of everything that you would probably not like to become conscious of. And so everything that you're holding in cognitive dissonance, everything that, would, if you were to embrace it, it would make you feel bad about yourself, or get you angry, or make you feel guilty, or make you feel shame, or remind you of memories that would invoke fear, or any kinds of negative emotions. You basically are going to slowly be going into those things. And it's not something that you do just all at one time. It's just something that you start to learn to digest slowly. And so the first thing is basically just is to say to yourself that whatever comes up in my psyche, whatever comes up in my mind, in my conscious ego, whatever shows up in consciousness, if it's negative, if it's something that I want to push back, then instead of distracting myself with this or that, with going online or with eating or even with exercising. I mean, exercising is obviously very good, but people can use that also to distract. Smoking weed or drinking or whatever the method is, instead of distracting away from that which makes me feel bad, I'm going to start going into it. I'm going to taste a little bit of this stuff. I'm going to let some of this come up. And when you're triggered, this is the best time to do it. When you find yourself, really feeling triggered by something makes you feel sad, something makes you feel aggressive, something out there in the world, another person, the president, or some conflict in the Middle East, or whatever it is you saw on the news, or something that your neighbor is doing or that your spouse is doing, whatever it is. When you feel triggered, that's the perfect time to go into this material. So you just basically say, okay, what's triggering me? What is the feeling? What is the impulse? What's the energy? What does that remind me of? When was the last time this happened? Try to detect a cycle, because it's always the same stuff. And slowly over time, try to detect the cycle and detect the types of feelings that come up over and over again, the types of triggers that keep happening over and over again, and start to trace them back to some basic emotions and go, okay, and then start to allow those emotions to come up and allow that negative content to be there. And you can journal it out, you can make paintings about it, you can do artwork about it. Excuse me. You can make artwork about it, which is kind of the Jungian thing to do. You can just the best thing to do is just to feel it, just to feel that material, and say, yes, this is part of me. This reminds me of my dad. Yeah, my dad had this. My mom had this, and in fact, looking at your parents and the areas in which you still feel that they haven't fully matured, well, then you probably have some of that too that you need to work out. So that's a good mirror actually for looking at it. And you basically just kind of say, I'm going to look at this stuff, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to become aware of it, and I'm going to take responsibility for it. I have this material in me. I have this aggression in me. I have this sexuality. I have this need to control my environment or control my spouse or whatever it is. I have this in me. Where does it come from? And just sort of accept it. Now, I will tell you now about a process called emotional processing that was developed out of something that John Ruskin wrote about in his book, Emotional Clearing. We just kind of called it emotional processing, just to give it a little bit of a, not to totally steal, but it is a little bit different, because Ruskin has you work with these emotions during meditation, and we have you working with these things when you're triggered, just in normal life. And so when you're triggered, you just, as soon as you can, you basically go sit down. If it's right after you're triggered, then that's perfect. But if you have to wait until later in the afternoon or whatever it is, you go sit down alone in a calm environment, and you recall the feelings and you allow them to come up. And a lot of times, if it's anger, the anger will come up, but you don't want to hit anything or anything like that. You don't want to act it out. You don't want to displace it. You want to just let it come up, let it fill your body. Your face might turn red or something like that, but you just kind of let that material come up, and then you'll see that behind the rage, behind the anger, which is sort of a masculine, positive or outward moving force, there will be a more feminine aspect of the energy too, and that will root back to grief or to shame or to fear, something more passive and more feminine. And then you'll want to feel that. So you might have anger on top, and then you might have grief or fear below that, and then you'll allow that to come up. And that'll probably make you cry, and that's good. And then you want to cry, and you want to just cry as much as you can for as long as you can until you feel that the energy has passed. And then you just do that whenever you can. And if you're triggered, yeah, like I said, if you're triggered at one time of the day and you're at work or something like that and you can't process this at that time, you just hold it for later, and then you do the process later. So that's described in the Transforming Darkness book and in our 2015 book, Shadow Tech. So that's a very important, I think, way of doing shadow work that doesn't come out of the Jungian system, that is newer, and which is very powerful, and very, very useful. Now, in terms of relationships, here we go. When you're triggered, I got some notes here for you. When you're triggered by someone else, let's say it's often someone else. It can be an event or a type of a thing, like a war or something like that, or an event that happens, but it's often a person. Because it's easy to project onto people, and it's like, even if it is a war or something, we'll immediately go to the politicians or something like that and be like, yeah, they're the bad ones and stuff. They did this. And so when you're triggered, ask yourself what part of that person that's triggering you is also in you. He's so aggressive, he's so selfish, he's so this, he's so that. Well, maybe you have those components in you too. Or maybe your own father had those components and you're wounded from those things being used against you in your childhood. So whether it's the trait itself is in you, or whether you've been wounded by somebody else who had that trait strongly hurting you, either way, there's shadow material in there, and you now can go in and you can go pull it out and you can start to assimilate it. And one of the things you can actually do is you can do like you can imagine, like if there's that other person, you can imagine actually putting yourself in a situation where you're meeting them, where you're friendly with them. Find that person that you're projecting onto, and then take yourself through an active imagination process where you're meeting them, you're talking to them, you're being compassionate to them, and they're telling you about their life story, and you're realizing, this is why they are the way they are, and you're resonating with them, and you're sitting next to them, and you can feel their heart energy, and you just put yourself in this active imagination process where you and that person that you are triggered by, the person that you don't like, is actually becoming your friend, and you're resonating with them, and you're starting to understand them more and why they are the way they are. And then you're going, yeah, well, I kind of understand that because I'm actually like that too. And so we have that in common. And you kind of just do this active imagination process where you allow the energy of that's in that projection to kind of fall apart. And so that's another shadow work practice that you can do. I described the emotional processing method to you. Here's another system. Well, first let me say, if you can get yourself, I really, really recommend that everybody that's doing this kind of work, that's attracted to this kind of thing, start to do some research on Jungian psychology. There's a book by Anthony Stevens called Jung, A Very short introduction or an intro. It's a very simple introduction or a very short introduction. I think that's what it's called, by Anthony Stevens. You can grab that. I'm sure there's plenty of videos online, and because Jung is very, very deep, very, 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 very. I mean, Jungian scholars spend decades really pulling apart his work and trying to understand the implications of it, and so it's incredibly deep. But the most basic understanding, just the most basic Jungian topology of the psyche, just the basic map of the mind of this is the conscious mind, the ego, this is the unconscious, here's the persona, here's the archetypes, anima and animus, and the shadow, and this is projection, and just basic things like that. Just the basic kind of toolkit of Jungian psychology is really all you really kind of need to get started with. And I'll do a video on that. I'll kind of brush up on it, and then I'll do a video where I kind of go over that for people. But yeah, so just kind of get a basic framework of Jungian psychology, because it's going to be very, very good. We are as a culture, highly psychologically illiterate. We're basically an illiterate culture when it comes to our understanding our psychology, and so we want to have basic psychological literacy. And there are different schools of psychology. There's different schools, and I remember hearing Edward Edinger say that there's as many schools of psychology as there are personality types, and that makes sense. So the people who are attracted to Jung are generally spiritual people, self-healers, wounded healers, people with a kind of a shamanistic kind of a tendency, and people who are naturally spiritual or religious but don't feel totally comfortable in the religion of their culture or of their family. These kinds of qualities often point people towards Carl Jung. So artists also, and people who are using the right brain, and intuitives, and people who are intuitive often are very interested in Jung and this kind of psychology. So the first thing I would say is get a little bit of background in Jung, and then we can have this common language. And it's we need that. If you go to the New Age community or the new spiritual community, whatever it is, and start using all that kind of language, it's not accurate. It's not clean enough and accurate enough. And you can translate all of that language into Jungian psychology or other forms of psychology, but it's so kind of fluffy and not accurate that I don't like using that kind of language. And so I would recommend that people use the Jungian system, so we have that kind of common language that we can use. Now, on top of that, there's a system called Internal Family Systems, IFS, developed by Richard Schwartz, and it's very compatible with the Jungian system. And this is a very good way of understanding the different parts of our psyche that lead to our reactivity, let's say, or to lead to conflicts and lead to addictions and lead to compulsive behavior and all of our trying to think about what's a good way of kind of summarizing that. I like Eckhart Tolle's term, the pain body. If you understand the pain body, you can understand the pain body is our sort of collective deep state. It's in our shadows. And it's sort of the culture of the unconscious that's constantly getting us into trouble. And in the internal family systems model, that helps you to kind of pull that apart. Instead of just saying, this is my shadow or this is my pain body, it says, well, this is this part. This is, mad girl, and this is running girl, or, this is play girl. I mean, I'm using some of the terms that Melissa used when she was psychoanalyzing herself. And, or, I have a part that we call monkey boy. And so you name these parts, and you get to know them, and you figure out where they came from, how they were formed, and what their personalities are, and why they're doing things. In IFS, there's a few categories of types of parts, and you have wounded parts that they call the exile, and then they have protector parts, or they have protector parts, and one of them is called the manager, and the other one is called the firefighter. So it's basically three kinds of parts. It's rather simple, actually. You got an exile, that's a wounded part, and then you've got a manager part that's trying to organize your life in a way so that the exile won't get wounded again. Stay away from these kinds of people, stay away from these kinds of situations, or always, be this way, always be good, and always be, never, just all the kinds of different behavioral characteristics that we pick up to keep us safe and clean in life. And that's so that we won't get hurt again. And so those are managers. And then there's firefighters. When the managers can't keep up, and we're sort of in an emergency situation, and we're getting triggered, and our exiles are getting hurt, then the firefighter comes in to try to put out the fire. So that's what distracts us. That what makes us go and drink some alcohol, or take some drugs, or run away from the situation, or whatever it is. We'll do that to try to cope with an emergency situation where our exiles are getting hurt. So that's the IFS system, and that's very, very helpful. I just gave you the full kind of basic understanding right there of that, because I want to simplify everything. You don't have to become a psychologist, and you don't have to read 20 books on every piece of this. You just need kind of a basic understanding. There's actually like a book called We All Have Parts by Colin E. that is almost like a cartoon type book, and it simplifies the whole IFS system, and you can get that book. So doing that's shadow work. That's a type of advanced, you could say cutting edge shadow work. And you can talk to your parts. Some people will be able to talk to their parts more easily. Some people, it'll be more difficult, but you can still get to know them and name them, and everybody can work with that system one way or another. So you got that. You got the emotional processing. You got the IFS parts work. I talked about Eckhart Tolle's pain body, and that's just an understanding. You should pick that up and read about that in any of his books or lectures. And that's kind of a toolkit there. And then in your relationships, because I was going to talk about this. In your relationships, when you invariably get into a conflict with your partner, what you want to do is, first of all, you want your partner, if it's at all possible, to get involved in this kind of work with you. That's what you want. And unfortunately, in relationships, when one person gets really serious about inner work, and the other person is not ready for it, it can damage the relationship. It can break up the relationship. But I would also say that sometimes there's parts of us that want to get out of the relationship anyway, and then we use that as an excuse to get out of the relationship. Because the best thing that you could possibly do is stay in the relationship and use it as an alchemical vessel for doing the shadow work. And even if the other person is not really so keen on doing it, if you start doing it and you start using the language and you talk to them about it, and you're like, yeah, I was doing this process, or after we got into this fight, I did the emotional processing. Remember when I walked out of there and I went into my room and you heard me crying and stuff? I was doing this process. Or, when that thing happened at work, I just did the emotional processing in the car. I just pulled over and I just did it in the car and stuff. You tell your spouse, your partner, about what you're doing. And even if they're like, oh, okay, well, that's good, and they're not doing it themselves, you just keep talking about it. Oh, you know what else I learned? I've been studying Jungian psychology and I found out blah, blah, blah. And I found about this kind of projection or that or whatever it is. And you just talk to them about it and you just bring them into it. They're going to learn the language because you're talking to them about it. Now, if they just completely shut it down and just never let you talk about it, well then, yeah, you're going to have a problem there. But you just need to recognize that the reason why they're shutting down is because they have a wounded exile that's afraid of these feelings that are going to come up if they start talking about these things. And so you need to approach your partner with compassion and say, I know why this is hard for you is because you have some of the same stuff that I have, and that there's a part of you that's afraid of embracing it, and maybe you don't know really how to process it. And so I understand that, and I want to help you. And just really come at it from a place of compassion. And it's not that they're so immature and they're so stubborn that they just don't want to do the work. It's that there's wounded parts in them that are afraid. And so you really have to approach it that way. And I think that most people, if one person is serious, they will be able to get the partner involved. Sometimes, though, that is not possible, and sometimes it is just part of our path that relationship will break up, and that your next relationship will be with somebody who is interested in doing the work. And that's if you're serious. If you're not that serious about it, well, then you're going to be like, whatever, blah, 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 and it's going to kind of fade away. It's going to kind of go into the background. But if you do become very serious about this, it's going to transform your relationships, your present relationships or your future relationships. And so in relationship, we're doing this work. When we get into conflicts, we often cannot stop ourselves from being triggered, and we get sucked into it, and then we start blaming each other. We start projecting and displacing onto the other person. But as soon as you become conscious of the fact that, okay, here we go again, and as soon as you become conscious of that, you want to try to bring that out, and you want to say, okay, John or Cindy, whatever your name is, I see we're doing it again. Let's stop. We're doing it again. We're turning the cycle again. We're doing the complex thing again. Okay, stop. The pain body's got us. And pull away from it and stop. Just stop. And it doesn't matter, where you're at, just stop. And then as soon as you can, come back to it and go, okay, let's work this out. What part of you was triggered? I'll tell you what part of me was triggered. It was when you did this, and blah, 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 blah. And then you can go from there into, well, what part of you was triggered? What's the name of that part? How is that part formed? Well, that's because my dad, or that's because my mom did this, and blah, 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 and I still have that fear, or I still have that insecurity. Okay, so go into it, pull it out, cry through it. And each person does that. And each person does that to the degree that they can. And so you just keep on bringing awareness to the conflicts. You just keep on stopping them as soon as you can. And then the amount of time that you stay in conflict shrinks over a period of time. So at first you might have conflicts that are just long, drawn-out fights that could last even days, some people have. But then you can get down to the point to where conflicts can last 1 minute or something like that. You know, you get taken over and stuff, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, here we go again, here we go again. That part is still reactive, okay, and you can start working with it and doing the work and taking responsibility for your side of it. You have to recognize, you can go to the full 100% responsibility if you want to, or you can at least say, I'm 50% responsible for this fight, for this conflict. I'm 50%, it's both of us. It's always in both of us. And even if you think, well, one person started it, and so they're the one you would think that has more of the responsibility, the person that started it. But once you get into this deeper, you learn that these shadow complexes, these parts, are actually instigating these fights under the surface, and they're sending out signals to each other, and you can become conscious of these signals actually. It's very refined, but over a period of time you can become conscious of this, and the victim of the fight, because there's always going to be an aggressor and a victim, and then they might flip. But at first one person will aggress on the other, and you would think that that person is the one to blame. But the fact of the matter is that unconsciously the victim had a shadow part that was attracting that other person to attack them, basically insinuating little bits of information and mannerisms and behavior to try to get the aggressive part in the other to attack them. And this goes on with groups, it goes on with entire societies that fight with each other and all of this. And so both parties are playing a role. One party is being the aggressor overtly, and the other one is doing it covertly. And then they might flip. And so then the victim might attack the aggressor, and then they might become the victim. And this can happen, it can come out of nowhere. And you could just be in a conversation and then all of this, and then it can just come out of nowhere, or something can trigger it from out here. It just can come out of nowhere, and then it just does its thing, and it's like a fire, and it just takes over. So, but everyone is involved in the process. Everyone is in the field. Mind is an embodied and relational field of energy and information. That's Dan Siegel. It's an embodied and relational field of energy and information. So when these things happen between people, it's in the field and everyone's playing into it. So that's how we do the work in relationship. And Melissa and I called that, well, we just called it alchemy. We called it, I think I started calling it relational alchemy later. And I don't know if that's being used as a term, but that's what it is. And people would call it being in conscious relationship. But this is a very deep level of this. So that's one. I could just go on and I could really kind of dig into relationship shadow work. But I think for now I'll kind of just leave it with that. And yeah, so let's see, how long have I been going here for? 48 minutes or something like that. I think that's long enough. And again, you can get either of our books, Shadow Tech, which is from 2015. That's Melissa, that was our original book that we put together that had a lot of information. It's really, our path was really about not just understanding our own shadows, our own pathology, but to understanding the human shadow and to how it relates to evil and the whole dark side of consciousness. And so so Shadow Tech was an effort to use models for understanding that. And then Transforming Darkness, which came out last year, 2024, was my effort to put a lot of complex material into a short, simple form. And then I also added the 4 quadrants model of shadow work in there, which I didn't discuss today. I'll discuss in another video, which is based on Ken Wilber's integral system. And I gave you shadow work practices in all 4 quadrants. There's probably like 30 things in there. And then I gave you an ethical manifesto, which is sort of an ethics of life being self-responsible for your own psychology. And I gave you a bunch of stuff like that. I talked about autonomous complexes and talked about the IFS system and red pilling and all kinds of stuff like that. That's in the 2024 book, and you can get that for free right now on the website, shadowtechalchemy.com. So there you go, and I'll be doing some other videos on some other subjects because, you know, now we're in a phase now where Melissa's not with us anymore, and it's you know, it's a huge shock and an initiation for me. And so now I'm putting out some new material, kind of going back through the material and making some new videos, presenting it again. That's kind of up to date. And so there we go. And if you have comments or questions, you know, this will be on YouTube. But you can also get in touch with me through the website. And if you're interested in personal counseling, I do that. And so that's all there. And I'll see you on the next one.